Time is Not the Measure, a memoir. Some people have called it a political memoir. Ambassador, thank you so much for making the time. We know it's been a crazy week. You came to South Africa because of the meeting of ambassadors during the week, the Heads of Commissions Summit that takes place every 2 years. What was that like?
Well, yeah, it's a conference of South African ambassadors from all over the world, and it takes
South African ambassadors.
South African ambassadors.
Yes.
It's really to get briefed about the program of government and to give us the opportunity to ask questions and clarify ourselves about our foreign policy, but also about developments domestically.
It was your first time being addressed by the new president. What was the difference in tone?
Yes, it was the first time being addressed by President Ramaphosa. And of course he outlined the new vision, the emphasis really being how to boost the economy, how to attract investment. So he was giving us the marching orders about what to do in our stations abroad to attract investors into the country.
Most of the time when we speak about Africa, we speak about sub-Saharan Africa. We hardly ever engage about events in Egypt and the latest there. And yet it's one of the biggest economies on the continent. What's it like being stationed in Egypt?
In fact, as you might be aware, for a long time South Africa was the biggest economy in the continent. And then we got overtaken by Nigeria.
Point.
Although other people argue that Nigeria was bigger than us even before, it's just that the way they were evaluating the strength of their economy was outdated.
Absolutely.
But now we've been overtaken even by Egypt. So we're the third largest economy in the continent. But of course we've got our own strong points where we are ahead of them. I mean, our economy is more sophisticated.
Yeah.
Our banking system is more advanced. Our infrastructure is more advanced. So there are areas in which we are ahead of them. Our manufacturing is the best in the continent.
Yeah. On the social side, where in South Africa racism is about black and white, in Egypt it's about Arab and the darker ones, the darker hued ones. What conversations are going on that side of the world in terms of social cohesion?
Yeah, I think that the difficulty they face is that economically, socially and otherwise, they are closer to the Arab world. Your Saudi Arabia, your Qatar, UAE and so on. So that's where most of their people look towards for cultural association and so on and so forth. Even the biggest investments actually come from the Middle East into Egypt. They don't come from Africa. So that influences the attitude of the people. So Africa is kind of something that still they have to work on. So
step in, Ambassador Vusi Mavimbela. What kind of projects are you working on? What interaction did you have with the South African Investment Summit in terms of bringing in business from Egypt?
Well, it's something that is part of our mandate. It's something we've been doing. It's just that now there is an emphasis and investigating new ways in which we can attract investment. But investment both ways, by the way. We attract South African investments into Egypt. We try and get Egyptian investors into South Africa. So it's a two-way process.
So time is not the measure. Sorry for indulging myself, but this is the reason you came in. A beautiful book, a follow-up onto your poetry book, No Lullaby for My Country. How did you decide to move from poetry to writing a memoir? Yeah, no, these are two different
absolutely genres of literature. The poetry was mainly the poetry that I'd been writing over time, even from exile. When I came back, I just decided to put it together and publish. But this book, I started writing it about 2 years ago. But of course, there were long breaks in between. But in reality, to sit down and say I'm writing, it was about 2 years ago. And the initial thought was actually provoked by my colleagues at the National Intelligence Agency. When I left, they gave me a replica of a book with a title outside, Klaus Mapepa, The Journey of a Revolutionary by Vusi Mavimbela. But the pages inside were blank. They said to me,
fill that up.
Our instruction is that you must fill up these pages with your life story.
What a beautiful challenge.
Yes.
It would take really knowing you for people to make such a request of you, because they reckon that there is a story to be told. But initial reviews that came out this week were saying that the book was written in response to questions about why you left the presidency under what some people would describe under a cloud, and were sent to Zimbabwe to an ambassador where you started your diplomatic career. Is that why you wrote the book?
No, that is far from the truth. I told you the first time the idea came into my mind is when my colleague said, you must write a book.
Absolutely.
You know, and you are right. My colleagues, this was my management staff at NIA. So when I was leaving them, they said, you know, one gift you can give us is to write a book, your life story. It's because I think they appreciated my life story after having worked with me, but also they appreciated the fact that I can write. But you see, the book they were asking me to write was not just my story, because many of those people had been with me in exile, and they worked under me in NIA. So they knew the story I'm going to write about myself can't just be about myself.
Absolutely.
It's a story about the ANC, it's a story about their own work, either in NIA or in the ANC.
There is a drive to bring out all the stories of South Africa and to find out, because everybody talks about Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, O.R. Tambo, and yet there are multitudes of people who are not necessarily known and contributed to the liberation of South Africa. And writing is a way of contributing to that contribution. And most people know you as somebody who was a NIA, somebody who worked from Velapanda, somebody who worked in the presidency, and now as an ambassador. What don't we know about Vusi Mavimbela?
You know, in fact, I think throughout my time after coming back from exile, many of the colleagues who have always known me, when they bump into me, they will ask, because even in exile I used to write.
Yes.
They'll ask me, do you still write? Why are you writing?
Yeah.
Why are you people quiet? You know, I go to funerals of the comrades and so on, and people say, hey, Mapep, do you still write? When are you writing? Why are you quiet? So there's been colleagues have always been reminding me that I need to write, you know, because I think, as you say, they know my history, but also they know that I've got some ability to tell a story.
Mm-hmm. Take us back to that time when you left the presidency. I remember writings by Mendy Rousseau, who was saying that there's just something not right about how you left. You never spoke about it much.
It's there in the book.
Yes.
They must buy a book and read it. Yeah, it was a difficult time.
Yeah.
I was there for something like 18 months when I was supposed to be there for 3 to 5 years, because things just didn't work out.
Yeah.
You see, what happened is that when President Zuma appointed me, something I didn't know, he only told me later, is that there was a very strong opposition against him.
To the appointment.
And he actually told those people off.
Yeah.
To say, you know, you don't know this man. Because his opposition the people who were supporting him, his lobby, were saying that I come from Velapanda. Because I come from Velapanda, so I'm
naturally you support Tokyo Sexwale.
Yes, naturally I support Tokyo Sexwale. And Tokyo Sexwale was still, in their own assessment, was still going to run for office. So they say, you can't have Tokyo challenging you, and then you've got Tokyo's men in your office. So, but he says he told them off, you know, but the pressure was just too much.
There's a real importance in the story that you're telling where you say a principal wanted to appoint you and there were people who were lobbying against it. And this is the nature of this space. When we see it happening, should it be taken as a personal thing, or is it the nature of this beast that when people get into these really higher senior positions, there's always going to be a group of people who are against it?
I think, again, I talk about it in the book. You know, part of the problem is that our politics has become kind of so personalized, and
should it be?
And there's no quota given. People can't compromise. People can't understand. It's us and them. You see, once we decide you are them, we are not us, then we want to build a Chinese wall between us, and we actually fight. It shouldn't be like that. Politics is not supposed to be like that. We're supposed to evaluate comrades and colleagues in terms of what they're able to bring to the table, what they're able to bring to the organization, what they're able to bring to the object of delivering the people of South Africa.
But sometimes opposition to an appointment, and I want to send out a disclaimer because the ambassador keeps referring to stuff that's in the book. It's a brand new book. We haven't really had the chance to read it, although we have a sense of what the contents are. But sometimes the opposition to an appointment is not necessarily based on your capability and your skills. It could be based on other reasons. Were you ever able to find out what the opposition to your appointment, what it was based on?
Well, it was based on what I'm talking about.
Being at Mvela Phanda. Was that the only reason?
The politics in the ANC had become so fractured, so that, as I say, it's them and us. If they think I'm them because they think I'm Tokyo's stooge or I'm Tokyo's mole, then I must be fought by all means possible. Whereas that's not how we're supposed to deal with the colleagues.
Do you
at
feel...
least that's what President Zuma told me the opposition was about.
This, over the years, has led to a message within the African National Congress about unity. In fact, this is the message they were talking about going into their 54th conference. Do you think the African National Congress is able to achieve that unity?
Well, if I did not have the hope that the African National Congress is able to achieve that unity, then I might as well commit suicide, because there is no worth in living. The ANC over the decades have had ups and downs, and when it had downs, it was able to rise up again. So we're all hopeful that we are going to find a way and reconnect with ourselves again.
What did you mean when you said time is not the measure? What is it not measuring?
It's difficult to explain the gist. You have to go through the book. But the point really is that it's not the fact that you have been in the struggle longer than me or longer than you. That's not where your worth is as a person. Somebody might have been there for a month, somebody might be there for 5 years, another one for 20 years, another one for 60 years. What is important is what you bring.
The value that you're adding.
The value that you are adding, or the value that you are subtracting. Because other people are actually taking away from the ANC instead of adding away to the ANC. By their behavior, by the things that they do, by promoting factionalism, we are taking away from the ANC. But other people give to the ANC. But that is not judged by how long you have been in the struggle. It's judged by what is it that you have brought to the organization, or what is it that you have taken away from it.
You're in the business of diplomacy and you worked in the Secret Service, so your initial disposition is to not reveal too much. But what are your hopes for South Africa going forward? We're going to an election next year. What are the hopes of the African National Congress?
You know, in this book, one of the things I'm saying, I hope that we can learn something out of it. Learn from our mistakes. It tries to point out mistakes, even mistakes of the leadership. Because I wrote this book also with understanding that people will read and they'll say, hey, we committed a mistake, we mustn't repeat it, you know. So I hope going forward, we've got elections next year. I hope we're going to be able to define ourselves as South Africans and define what the objective we have as South Africans and not be consumed in fratricidal fights within the ANC and try and broaden the front of people who support the project of emancipation of the people.
All right, I have to wrap up the interview, but I started by asking you about the economic developments in Egypt. Just on the social side, where the Arab Spring started in Algeria and in Egypt, what is it like socially now in Egypt? Can South Africans freely go visit now?
No, absolutely. I mean, from the time of the Arab Spring, tourism has picked up again. So it's really the place to go. Yeah. By the way, if you are an African, especially if you are a black African, you must come to Luxor. And when you are in Luxor, apart from seeing the pyramids, you must go to a place called Luxor. That's where the African pharaohs, black African pharaohs like me and you, that's where the kingdom comes from. And when you go there, you see the kingdom that they had built there, and you'll come back proud.
So besides this book, we have other books to, other reading to consume in terms of what to do in Egypt. Thank you so much for your time, Ambassador Vusi Mavimbela. Time is not the measure, is the book. Where is it available?
It's going to be available from Tuesday in exclusive books around the country.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for making the time.
That is your copy, by the way.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I'm declaring to my bosses. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask him to sign it for me. Let's take a break. We'll be back in a moment.